Laura, anything off topic? Anything that's not okay? Anything off the table? Any questions you don't want?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. If we run into one I don't want, I'll say it.
Glad. I was afraid you're going to say, don't ask me about who's lying. Don't ask me about musical improv. I don't want to talk about those things. Done with them. Only ask me about the pandemic. I want to talk about that for an hour.
Right, nonstop, because it's a really fun topic.
So in the chat, let us know if you've got a question and we'll give you a chance to ask it. If you don't want to come on camera, you just want to ask a question, put it in the chat and we'll ask that. But all right, thank you so much for joining us. We actually started doing these conversations at the beginning of the pandemic, thinking we'll be doing this for a week or two until we can get back together. But it's been a good way for us to keep the community engaged and keep the energy going. Good. But you've been pretty busy during this time as well, right? You've been doing some virtual events.
Yeah, I've been teaching online some. And then the bigger thing that I did, both my husband Rick and I did, was like some long-term projects the big projects that you think, I'd love to do that, and you never have time. Right. So Rick started a podcast, which was a big event. And then I did the online series for musicians, which also was something that I'd been thinking for a couple years. Like, I want to do this, but I never had the time because it's a big time commitment, Yeah. So I was like, this, either I'm going to lay on the couch and gain 1 million pounds, or I'm going to pick myself up and do something creative. And so that was my big pandemic project, was the Musician's Guide to Improv Comedy.
That's great. And that just launched, right?
Yeah, it just launched, and we've got a lovely group. We did we have a Facebook group that you can be part of when you join. And we had our first Q&A and our first little community, and it was so great. It was nice to meet all the people who were taking the course, and people could ask questions and all that fun stuff.
That's good. Where can people find it? Give it a plug.
On my website is the easiest, laurahall.com, and it's right there on the front page. And there's if you follow the link, there's like a little video that explains it more, because it is from the musician side.
Right.
I've had a few people like, wait, it's for singers? Like, nope, it's for musicians. It's for people who want to do what I do, basically.
Yeah.
And especially I've noticed, I came up in Chicago, and I was in the middle, just immersed in the scene at Second City and I.O. and The Annoyance, and there were tons of other musicians around. But if you're in Rolla, Missouri, you're playing or you're in a college team or something, you don't have other people to learn from typically. There's lots of actors, but there's usually not other musicians who know how to do it. And so that was sort of the impetus for doing the online course, for people who want to learn how, but don't have, my mentor was the great Fred Kaz, who basically invented how music works with improv. And I was so lucky, I was working as a waitress at Second City. So I just had this like complete immersion. I could learn from him, but we don't all have those kind of opportunities. So.
Yeah, here in North Carolina, we have I call it a musical director desert. And there's plenty of people that I think are very talented and could do it. But as they look at their options, they're like, well, I'd love to do it on a Tuesday when I'm free, but I'm booked all weekend with actual musical gigs. So it's hard to compete.
Yeah, that can be one of the challenges. The other challenge sometimes is people don't know how to explain to them what you need for improv, because it's a very specific, it's a very specific way of playing. And so it's like, will you do this? But we don't know how to tell you how to do it exactly, So that definitely can be a challenge. And it's really the reason why oftentimes the musician is the only one getting paid, right? Because you got to get a commitment from them. And so you have to be able to some extent, compete with their other gigs, is the reality.
I imagine teaching virtually and through your course, you've got a chance to connect with musical directors from all over.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, if you think about your time in Second City versus now, is the musical director changed, or how's it similar? How's it different?
There are certainly some things that are still true. It's interesting though, because it felt to me like there was a dip in interest in musical improv, and now there's this huge upswing. I would say in the last 5 years or so, 5 or 10 years,
Yeah.
like lots of people, lots more interest in it. What's different is there's such a wide variety. Like people are, using singing puppets, and there's all sorts of long forms that there didn't used to be, and just sort of wider, different genres. People like to do the really specific genres. So we're not just improvising a musical, we're improvising, a Sondheim musical, or a Urinetown style musical, or you know what I mean? So people like go down these paths, which is super cool. What's the same, and I think will always be the same, is that the way the musician can support a scene, particularly with underscoring, that, like dramatic, what works dramatically in a scene, the emotion of a scene, playing the emotion or the rhythm or the sort of vibe of a scene. That's the same always, because like emotion is emotion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I love how wide musical improv is. It's much wider than when I was doing it.
What do you think fueled the resurgence or the reentrance? Any thoughts or ideas?
I'm not really sure. I like to think maybe it's Whose Line and people being inspired by seeing, like Wayne and Jeff and Brad and Chip, but I don't know. I don't really know. I couldn't tell you. That would be somewhat, research for a smarter person than me.
When you were in Second City, I assume you had kind of some decisions around a more traditional musical path or improvised music. And you've gotten to do both, but have you thought about like what that looks like, why you did one versus the other?
I originally sort of stumbled into Second City. Like I said, I was waitressing there, and then it turned into a touring company gig. It was one of those. The great thing for me with Second City, especially with the touring, that applied to everything else, was going to a different venue every night, playing a different piano, different sound system, different audience, different, that you could get up on any stage and figure out how to do a good show. That applies to any sort of performance, right? So that was great. And in Chicago, there was a lot of work doing improv, not only with Second City, but like I worked with the Annoyance quite a bit, and I worked with IO some. But I never, luckily, never had to make the am I one or the other. So even as I was doing improv, I was still playing in bands. I was still writing. I would write an original musical. do you know what I mean? I did a little bit of everything. And I think those other things I did made me better at improv. And I think improv made me better at those other things I did. So luckily, I never had to choose. I have always been someone who has really wide interest musically. So this is sort of the perfect career for me. Yeah, I get to do a little bit of everything,
Works out great.
Yeah.
And the support that your course and that community creates, maybe that's going to help a lot of people that don't have the support where they live, and maybe we'll see another resurgence.
Yes, and I think there are the actors out there who are really hungry for it. Like you said, in your community, you probably have lots of actors who are hungry for it, but don't have the musicians. So I'm hoping that, a new crop of musicians will support the interest in it that a lot of the actors have.
Well, very cool. What's the name of Rick's podcast?
It's called So Says Rick. And says is SEZ. So Says Rick. And he does storytelling.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So he's quite a fine storyteller. That's his other passion besides improv. He really likes doing storytelling.
I love podcasts, so I'll make sure to check that out.
Oh yeah, check it out.
And you, the two of you met at Second City, right?
Yes, we did. Yes,
I would say that romances in the troupe is always leads to trouble, but it's worked for you guys, right?
I know. Actually, 2 couples ended up getting married out of our first touring company. So
Really?
out of 8, 7, 8 people,
Yeah.
4 of them married each other. Yeah. It is a good thing though, because, like it definitely has its pitfalls, to be in a couple, especially a couple starting out in such close quarters,
Yeah.
But luckily he got promoted to main stage. And so we weren't in the van together. That's probably the reason we ended up actually getting married.
There you go. Perfect. Great. I see George has a question. George, turn your camera on. I'll give you a chance to ask that.
Hello, Laura. Hi, Kale.
Hi.
Hi. I was wondering, how do you feel about musical improv online, and how do you think it can be improved, areas of improvement?
Yeah, it definitely is a challenge online. And part of it is just the mechanics, having people sync up when they're, sometimes thousands of miles apart, So, but it's gotten better. Like Zoom has gotten better. And depending on the way you do the settings in your, each person does the settings in their own personal Zoom account, can really help with the sync. The tricky part is with Zoom is that you really can't have more than one person singing at a time. Sometimes you can have 2, but that's sort of barely. And you have to get everyone's levels all balanced before you start, right? Because like if the piano's too loud, you'll get shut out. If you're too loud, I'll get shut out. But if we're balanced just right, we can both get heard. So it definitely is a little bit of a balancing act. There are other programs that I have used, and I'm trying to remember. There was one that I did with we used with the Vintage Improv Fest, and you can have up to 10 performers in the room, and you can have like 3 singers and a musician all at once. So we actually could like they could sing harmonies and stuff. And I can't think of what it was called. I might think of it. StreamYard. Thank you. Yes, it was StreamYard. And I had experimented with some other things and not had much success. StreamYard seemed to be pretty consistently good. And it does depend on all the singers, like having some fairly up-to-date equipment. One person with bad Wi-Fi can like mess the whole thing up. So you really have to sort of like go, okay, we're all going to agree to like really get our tech as good as possible, and then we'll do okay. But, Rick and I taught a workshop, and we were in LA. All the participants were in Buenos Aires, so over 2,000 miles away, and we were able to do it. And I was like, wow, Zoom's come a long way, so it is possible. The other thing is that it's harder, if you're on stage with someone and say you're singing and it's like, I'm about done, and maybe, it's going to be your turn to sing. When we're in person, it's a lot easier to communicate that. When we're on Zoom, it's much harder to be like, okay, you take it, So we have to be watching and listening that much more to be able to have that back and forth with each other. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George.
Thank you. George is dialing in from Manila, the Philippines.
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, I've worked with a few people from the Philippines. Yeah.
Which is one of the benefits of online improv is you get connected to a community much larger than you normally would have. And you were telling me before you're doing some streaming shows.
Yeah, I'm doing a streaming show this Friday with my own music. So a singer-songwriter streaming show. Again, always having, many balls in the air. And it's the first singer-songwriter thing I'll have done for a while. So I've got a bunch of new songs that I wrote during the pandemic, and then some other ones of mine. And that'll be on Friday night, the 8th. And that's on my website too, if you're interested. It's free and it's a live stream. It's like an hour and a half long. And then in November, I'll be doing a live stream, but it'll be a musical improv live stream with my friend Shuli Cowan and Hillary Rowe. And that one also is free. So if you wanted to, you want to have double dip, first me as a singer-songwriter, then doing music improv.
That sounds perfect. Have you guys been together practicing, or what's that look like?
The singer-songwriter, well, luckily we're going to do it as a trio. One of them is Rick, so that helps.
Okay.
And the other is our friend Luke. And so we have been practicing. Shuli and Hillary are both from a group called Opening Night, the improvised musical. And so we've played together in that context quite a bit. But we've gotten together to go like, oh, how do we do it as 3 people? Which is a different thing. But we'll all be in the same room together. That's the treat. Even though we're live streaming, we'll be in a shared space and there will be a small select audience. So we will get a little bit of the human. That's the other thing about performing on Zoom, is just it can feel like you're in a void. You have to just trust that it's going okay, because you're not getting that feedback that you do. I mean, that's half the reason why we do it, right? We love that feedback.
Yeah, I've been doing it enough that I had kind of convinced myself, like, I'm doing it. It's just for me, right? It's a little bit different. And as long as I'm having a good time, that's really all that matters. But then the first time we got back on stage, and it was actually doing a musical portion. And I was like 3rd out of 4 in a line doing a song. And when I get to my part, the audience broke into applause. And I was like, oh, wait, that's very different. That's what.
Yes. That's the thing, right? That's the thing we've been missing. Yeah.
You get involved in Whose Line when it was still in the British version of Whose Line, right?
Well,
when they came to the US?
Yes. So it was actually like a hybrid. It was produced by the BBC with a British host, but it was specifically to see how American audiences would like it. So it was a hybrid between the BBC and ABC, which, it ended up. And then they used it for test marketing. They used those first episodes for test marketing in the States and got really good response. And then they thought, well, then if you put Drew in, who, his show was like at the height of its fame then, like, okay, if they like it this much with this British host who most of them had never heard of, they'll love it with Drew. So yeah, it was great though, because it was just it just kind of seamlessly happened, And
how did you get connected?
It was a Second City connection. So one of the guys I toured with, Ron West, had done the British show. You know how in the British version they often had Americans. I mean, They had Ryan and Colin. Well, Ron was one of them that they had on the British show, so they hired him as a producer when they were coming to America, partly to have him help cast, because they didn't know as many American improvisers. And they were like, do you know any musicians? And Ron's like, well, I toured with Laura. So there were 3 people set to audition. I went first, and then they never auditioned the other 2.
Oh.
So I feel very honored. But I got to audition with Wayne and Brad. So, it's the classic, we all made each other look good, right?
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Roxy, who was the first one here, has a question. Roxy, you want to come ask a question?
Come on, Roxy.
Hey.
Hey.
So my question is, I'm going to give you backstory because that's what I do. So I used to play piano, but I left it a long time ago because I thought I would have an illustrious career as a cheerleader, but I didn't. So I'm trying to get back into it to do my own one-woman show because I wanted to be I also want to do musical improv, but are there any things that you just go to that are real simple that just kicks it off for you and, just kind of gets you in simple but awesome? That's all I'm looking for. Simple but awesome, chords that you're just these are go-to. You're never going to fail.
There are a few, and everybody finds their own, and people, you can lift them or adapt them from other songs. A lot of times I'll find part of a song that I like, and then I'll kind of just take it, and I don't want to ever just like go, oh, I'm going to play that Red Hot Chili Pepper song as is, right? Because then it becomes like a song parody. But sometimes I might go, oh, I like that chord progression. Then I'll fool with it and change it and make it my own. That is totally, I think most improv musicians do that. But like, there's a few, like, especially like with, if you want simple chord progressions, like especially with like funk grooves and stuff, most funk is literally 2 or 3 chords. And so it's really more about the groove. You know what I mean?
Oh, I love funk. I know about that groove, Laura. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like if you listen to, there is a James Brown song that has only 1 chord for the entire song. But part of that is because he's got the whole band and, the bass is jamming away. There's also a Beyonce song that's only 1 chord. I can't remember which one it is. But like, I like... that's all you need for a whole song. Really. Okay. You know what I mean? You can take a groove like that, and because it's easy to sing to, and you know what I mean? So like I would maybe play something like that, like for a group number, if I was accompanying a whole group, because it's got the loop, but it doesn't get boring because it's got a groove. You know what I mean? So you could find your own things like that, your own grooves, your own feels, but you can base it on music that you love. Like start from something you love and then go, oh, what could I do that's you know what I mean? Like, again, I don't want to say, oh, just play that song, but, oh, I love this Prince song. What could I do that's kind of like it?
Doesn't love Prince. Yes. And this is kind of a 2-parter. Do you find any other instrument as fun as the piano, like that you would that you also are like, oh, you must have, like, if and when you have to have this?
Oh, you mean that I like to play personally, or that I think works for improv?
Well, either.
Well, I also play acoustic guitar, and I like to write on the acoustic guitar because I write differently than I write on the piano. So I feel like it kind of stretches my creativity. And also, I think guitar is the second best choice for improv. But like I saw a group once, and the only instrument they had was vibes. Like, yeah. You don't know what vibes sound like? Oh, no. Oh, it's like, right. So their whole show was like, I walked into a dark bar. You know what I mean? It made the whole show have that vibe. So there are other instruments that completely work for it, but it colors it differently, right? If you do an improv show with a guitar, it's going to have a different vibe than with a piano, but it can be really interesting. I've seen tons of groups that do it. Sometimes it makes it more poppy, more folky, whatever, depending on the way you play guitar. But I think it is the second best. I do think piano is the most versatile, though. Okay. Especially like for the underscoring part and those elements of doing an improv show. But yes, I highly encourage you. There's all sorts of tutorials online about, piano skills, or learning, like learn a song. Like I said, like go, oh, here's a piano tutorial on YouTube on how to play this song. And so like learn it from the tutorial and then start fooling around with it and see what you come up with that's yours, that's kind of inspired by it, but is yours.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. I am inspired. Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.
I can't wait to see Roxy, the one-woman musical. That's going to be
yes, exactly.
Awesome. You play on the Who's Line with Linda Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this is just my ignorance since I'm not a musician, but it seems like doing the music for an improv scene is one thing, but then having to have somebody else and be on the same page with them. Is there a secret to that, or is there a key to how that works?
How it's worked with Linda and I don't really know, because I've seen improv shows where it's a whole band, and I don't really know how they worked it out because I didn't know them personally. But with Linda and I, sort of the general rule of thumb is if it's a genre that's more piano driven, I'm leading the charge and kind of she's following me. But if it's something that's more guitar driven, if it's, heavy metal or something, right? It's the guitar is she's leading the charge and I'm following her. There definitely has to be communication though. You have to really have a connection between the two musicians. So instead of it just being like musician to singer, now you have a triangle, musician to other musician to singer.
Yeah.
And then someone has to kind of cue when things are happening, like we're going to the chorus or we're going to end or there'll be a bridge or whatever those other sections are. Someone kind of has to cue it. So what you don't see on Whose Line is that Linda and I are kind of hollering back and forth quite a bit.
So you're not only giving each other signals, you're talking to each other.
We're sometimes talking because if both our hands are busy,
yeah,
we can't, sometimes I'm conducting like the way you conduct.
Yeah.
But if both my hands are busy and both her hands are busy, guitar takes two hands. You can't play it with just one,
Right.
Then we're hollering it out, like, let's do the tag. Let's go to the bridge. Take me to the bridge. Yeah. So it's a good thing we're not mic'd.
No, I think they should mic you. That would make it even better, I think. I like seeing how the sausage is made. That's cool. We got Joe's got a question. Joe, do you want to turn on your camera and say hello?
Sure. Hi, Laura. First time
Hi, Joe.
caller, long time fan. Let me start out with I'm really old, so I've got a lot of improv experience, a lot of acting. I'm a voice actor in LA. I just happen to be in Barcelona right now.
I can tell you're a voice actor by your booth there.
Yeah, it's either a booth or it's a shower, so one of the
Right.
two. But I do parody songs, and a lot of those have been on Dr. Demento, things like that. So the idea of coming up with something funny for a song works in my head, but I'm very particular about crafting the song so that it's funny, and I have trouble connecting on a musical improv basis. It's like I've got a box full of tools and parts, and I have no idea how to put all of it together to get a spontaneous thing that happens on stage. If you understand what I mean. So I don't know how to connect those pieces. I don't know if maybe on the music side you do the same thing or you walk that path.
What do you mean walk? And now I'm curious, the very end of it.
Well, for instance, you had professional training in music and how to
Right.
play, and then took that leap from improvising music.
Oh, right.
And I've got like the same thing on the acting side, but on the singing side, I never seem to have made that bridge between being spontaneous with singing
Right.
music. Yeah.
Well, and part of it is changing the expectation, right? If I'm writing a song, I'm actually very particular about the lyrics, and I will go over and over a verse and really craft it and struggle with that one rhyme or whatever. And when I'm writing, to me, that's completely different than improvising.
Oh.
And so part of it is definitely changing the expectation. And the expectation from the audience is really different too. If you're doing a concert and you're saying, here's these songs I've written, that's one set of expectations that the audience would have. But if you're making something up on the spot and they know it, they're like, you already have 100 bonus points because they know how challenging it is to make something up on the spot, right? So it's a different animal, but you have to let go of You have to let go of this over here where you like to really craft what you're doing, right? And sometimes people who are well-trained singers or or writers who write their own material a lot, they have the hardest time doing song improv.
Yeah, that
And
makes
so
sense.
I understand where you're coming from, and like I worked with one woman who does a lot of musical theater, and she's got a fabulous voice, beautiful musical theater voice. And she's like, I can't do it because it's not my best singing. And I'm like, oh, of course it's not your best singing. You're making it up as you go, for crying out loud. When you're, standing on stage doing Wicked, you've been rehearsing those songs. You probably worked with your vocal coach. You've really thought about your placement, your breathing, your all that. Now here you are making up the lyrics, the melody, trying to follow what the instrumentalist is doing, thinking about your other actors on stage, thinking about what the suggestion was and how you can unpack that. It's so much to think about. But again, the listener expectation is completely different too. So you kind of have to let go of it.
Okay. Well, that sounds a lot less pressure intensive too, because I think I'm putting all this pressure on myself to be like, well, that's not going to be perfect, so I may as well not do that at all.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and you can't go into it with that. Right. You just can't go into it with that,
Okay.
and you'll do, when I do song improv, I do some of my, I'll have moments where I sing really out of tune, because I'm thinking about 20, you're thinking about so many things. You're really processing a lot. That's what's like really fun and stimulating about it in a way. To me, it feels like I am firing when it goes well. I'm firing on all cylinders here. My creative, my analytical, my lyrical, my vocal, my melodic, it's all going. But sometimes it doesn't all fire.
Yeah, I sometimes I feel like I'm a jet engine with training wheels bolted on, and I just have to throw those training wheels off and not care where the jet engine ends up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you take some workshops and just try and in the workshops really allow yourself to be, this is what this will be. And it is changing your own expectations.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Imagine you've experienced this, or maybe you've worked with musical directors, but there's people that have the natural ability and they've learned part of it, but some people are just rhythmically challenged, or they've got the energy and the enthusiasm, but not the natural ability. Have you run into that, and how do you work with those folks so they're part of the troupe as well?
Absolutely. And, like when we'll do a workshop and we'll have, say 18 students in it, you might have 2 or 3 who really struggle rhythmically or something. You know what I mean? And so, so there are different exercises that I'll do sometimes when people have challenges rhythmically. One of the great ones is singing in gibberish. So now you're taking lyrics off the table. Okay. All you're doing is thinking about melody and how it's working with the instrumental, the instrumental part. I also sometimes really encourage people to be physical, to be moving physically, but not randomly. If they're moving randomly, it actually takes them out of the groove. But if they're like, I was so proud the last workshop I taught, there was one of the guys who kind of was challenged rhythmically. And before he started singing, I could see him do this. Yeah, come on, get in the groove. And then he started, and he was so much better because he gave himself the moment to like feel it physically. So a lot of times it's just helping people like connect to that in themselves, and again, also to change the expectation, right? Like if you're singing as a character and your character cares about what they're saying, the audience will forgive if you're a little flat, if you come in a little early, whatever. If you're committed and engaged and into it, I say this with love. Look at Colin Mockery. He's not a great singer. He'll be the first to say it, but people love to watch him sing. right? Because he's all in, so there's like commitment goes a long, long way.
We were talking about the the workshop we had this morning with Stephanie Ray around rapping, and this thing that I noticed I see a lot in musical improv. There's just a lot of joy in it. Like the people that are doing it, even though the quality might be all over the board, the joy is even higher than you might normally see in an improv workshop.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've experienced that.
Yes, and the fear, right? Like the potential for fear. When you'll start a workshop, quite often people are like, I am scared to death, but I'm trying it anyway, So it's like the fear can be higher because it feels vulnerable to sing, but then the joy can be is so great too. Yeah. So it's like, hang in there, get past the fear because it's going to be fun.
It's very much, especially for people that maybe have done improv for a while, it takes you back to that very first time that you stepped foot on in an improv class or workshop.
Yeah.
Same thing is like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And sometimes like super experienced improvisers who, I've been doing this for 30 years but they're like, but the thing I always remind people is that like everything that you've done so far in improv, all the skills that you already have, they continue to apply with musical improv. I think sometimes people feel like it's starting all brand new. But the same things that make a great scene, a commitment to your scene partner, strong relationships, strong emotions, those same things make for a great song, right? So it's like you can carry what you know about scene building, for example, into song building.
I think I know I struggle with it. It's commitment, right? I want to sing this rock ballad, but I don't want to put myself out there. So I kind of half sing it. How do you push people beyond that?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And again, that's back to like people feeling vulnerable when a lot of us feel vulnerable when we're singing. Yeah. Sometimes saying it's not you singing it, even if we're doing a game where you're not a character in a scene, right? For me personally, and like for my husband, Rick, my favorite way to sing in an improv show is as a character, right? Rather than a game like Irish Drinking Song or something, you know what I mean? That's more presentational. But so it's not Kale singing that rock ballad, it's that character. And even if you are playing a game like Irish Drinking Song, you can still you can mentally be that character or a character playing that game. When I first started as a singer-songwriter, I had to be sort of a character because I was so nervous about performing. Yeah. So I had this sort of character that I would play, and that was what allowed me to like fully invest myself in what I was doing. That was my way in. So yeah, no matter what game, like even if you're doing a hoedown or whatever, you could be a character.
I like it. I'm going to try that next time.
Yeah.
We got Mike. Mike has a question. Mike, you want to come on stage?
Hey, Mike.
Mike, you're on mute.
Oh, you're muted.
How about now?
There you go. There you go.
Good. So this is a question from a non-musical improver.
Okay.
One of my favorite parts of Whose Line was were the songs that you did where you would have, the only thing you'd have to work with was a song title and a musical genre like classic rock or country or whatever. I'm curious, from your perspective, did you have a song or a riff in your head for each of those genres, or is it something that just happens out of the air? What's the behind the scenes story there?
The inside scoop.
Exactly.
Well, it definitely, the more sort of open-ended generic styles, like if it's rock opera or blues, reggae, sort of an open-ended style. Those ones, I think we tended to kind of make up out of the air. We would, I would be like, let's do G minor. And I had a reggae groove in my drum machine. And then we'd figure out, and also because like a style like reggae is simple, right?
Right.
It doesn't have really complex changes or anything. Some more styles that were more complex, like ragtime or something, I would have to really fool around with beforehand to kind of get some ragtime riffs in my hand. And then, especially as time went on and we've gotten more and more specific. So now it's not just, contemporary R&B, it's Rihanna.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? It's not just hip hop, it's R. Kelly. So those ones, Linda and I definitely had to do research for, because we had to try and figure out what makes R. Kelly different than generic rap, right? Because if you just call rap or hip hop, that is easy for, you know what I mean? We would pull out of the air. So when we're doing the show, we have a heads up at the beginning of the week. So if we're taping on a Friday, at the beginning of a week, we get a list of maybe 80 genres that might show up. And if there are specific ones, we might do a Beyonce, or we might, something like that. Then we would do research on it, and Linda and I would jam on it a little and kind of figure out, oh, okay, you play electric guitar, I'm going to use this synth sound, we'll use these drums. We would get a sort of basic shape of it.
Gotcha.
Now, we're still, then when we played on the show, Wayne doesn't, there's Veronica driving her car. When we're on the show, Wayne doesn't know what the subject's going to be, right? So, and we don't know, like, necessarily, when do we go to a chorus? How long will it be? We don't know all that, but we've at least gotten a sort of sketch.
I see.
Especially for those more specific styles. So does that answer?
Yeah, as a viewer watching the show, one of the levels of fun for me is listening to the music, and every now and then I'll hear this riff like, oh, that's Jumpin' Jack Flash, or that's this song or that song.
Or kind of like, because we definitely can't play existing songs because of copyright. They'd have to pay for it, right? But we might have listened to Jumpin' Jack Flash and then Linda might have come up with a guitar riff that sounds kind of like, most definitely. It's sort of what I was saying earlier to Roxy, like, you're kind of always copping things from different kinds of music that you listen to. If you're doing song parody, that's a specific thing. But for the most part with improv, we're not doing song parody. We're creating something that's in the neighborhood of, we want it to sound like the Rolling Stones, but we're not just playing a Rolling Stones song.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, well, that'll be our time. Thank you so much, Laura, for investing the time and contributing to the growth of the community here, and for everything that you've done for improv. I look forward to your screen shows and look forward to learning more about your online courses. All of that is available through laurahall.com. So thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who attended. Thank you for your questions and thank you for your time. Talk to you again soon.